Welcome to the Health on Track podcast. Let's talk well-being.
Welcome to the Health on Track podcast, offering you a shot of wellness. I'm Hayley, Member Engagement and PR Manager at GIG Golf. How many of us have spoken to children and feel like your words are going in one ear and out the other? Well, this episode is for you. We don't just want kids to listen to what we're saying. We need to be able to communicate in a way they understand, and what's more important is to teach them how to be effective communicators themselves. We're here today with Sylvie Ebert, a certified parenting coach of 6 years. She works closely with parents to focus on their relationships and their communication with kids through her company called Connected Parenting. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sylvie.
Thank you for having me, Hayley.
You're welcome. I'm really excited to learn. Communication in its whole is a huge aspect of life, right?
Yes.
And then managing it with children is a whole different ballgame as well, isn't it? So can you just give me a little bit of information about connected parenting and what connected parenting is?
Yes. So the reason why I called it connected parenting, because my focus really when I work with parents is, as you already mentioned it, I focus on the parent-child relationship, specifically on the connection. How can we foster the connection between the parent and the child? And along with that comes effective communication. And that is really what the name is all about, connection.
Connection. And out of curiosity, why did you start connected parenting? Like, what was it for you that made you feel like that was your passion? That was what you served a purpose in life as to why you needed to kind of come into this space?
Okay, so at the time when that idea sparked of becoming a parent coach, I was pregnant with my 6-year-old son. And I was very deep inside the corporate world. I've worked in the corporate world for 12 years. And I started reflecting as I was pregnant with him. I have an older one, an 8-year-old daughter. So it was my second pregnancy. And I was reflecting on the parenting arena and on the corporate world. And as I was comparing those two worlds, I would realize how much is done in the corporate world for the employee. We have to arrive already with a full-fledged education when we start our jobs, and then along our road we get supported with workshops and trainings to become better at our job. And as we reflect on the parenting arena, we see that despite the much bigger responsibility we have of raising a human being and helping them launch into this world in their best way possible, we are left without any preparation nor proper guidance to do so. Mm-hmm. And that's where I had a deep calling of helping other parents, not to just parent, but to parent well. And that's where the journey started. And I never looked back, basically. I was honored to work with a lot of families. Nowadays, a lot of dads have come for help, which is very beautiful. And I was blessed to work with a lot of parents.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a lovely story. And I think you're right. Like, we're always learning. We're continuously learning. No one teaches you how to be a parent.
Yes.
It kind of just hits you.
Yeah.
And one day you're pregnant and you're kind of thinking, and I can say this because I have a child myself, when you're pregnant, you're waiting and you're excited for the baby to come, and the baby comes and you go, oh, I've read all these books and I've Googled everything and I've gone to all these classes, the antenatal classes, and no one prepares you for the minute you take the child from the hospital to home. And then you just are kind of making it up. You are constantly, every day, just making up, okay, today they need this, today they need this, oh, it's changed now, we need to do this. But no one's guiding you. Mm. You're just freestyling everything.
Absolutely.
Unless they have someone like you in their corner helping them. So I appreciate what you do. And can you tell me how is it different communicating with children to adults? What's the difference, do you find?
Okay, so I just want to take one step back here. What I really mainly focus on when I help parents or when I work with parents, when I team up with them, is a lot of parents come to me and they say, you know, the bribing and the punishing and the threatening, and I've tried so many things and nothing works, and
The naughty step.
the naughty step and the timeouts, and we are actually really disconnected now. And my main mission basically is to help a parent move away from this parent to child dynamic, which is more control and fear based, like you do as I say, towards moving away from that towards this parent with child relationship, where the parent is not so much concerned anymore about the control, because we never had it all along and we will never have it. Where the parent can let go of that, learning to let go of that, and focusing on mutual understanding and respect as part of the communication. So going back to your question, how is it different when we communicate with a child? Now, we have to distinguish the age, right? I mean, when we communicate with a toddler, it's different from when we communicate with a 5 or 6 or 8-year-old. But what I see is a very intense, what is very intense in the dynamic of the parent-child relationship and the communication is that at any given moment we spend with our child or children, we don't expect the same, we're not interested in the same, and we don't need the same. So when they're very small and when they're babies and toddlers, we're very happy to bridge this gap constantly to meet their needs, to meet their interests, to meet their expectations. But as they grow, our expectations change, our interests change as well. And there is no surprise then that we tend to slip into overcorrecting them, rather to meet our expectations and our needs, while we forget that the relationship is primary and that overcorrection cannot build that connection. I think that's the toughest part of parenting, understanding that the dynamic is really, really intense, and that we have to make an intentional effort to create that effective communication with our children, understanding our needs first, our interests and our expectations, to then meet theirs through mutual understanding and respect.
Yeah, that's so interesting what you say. And I think a lot of parenting comes from how you were parented, how your parents were to you. And then you either become, I want to be exactly like that, or I want to be nothing like that. So then you either kind of over-exaggerate what you need to be doing, or you exaggerate how the child can kind of perceive you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, parenting, to be honest, is about the parent. Yes, there wouldn't be a parent if it wasn't for the child, but parenting is about raising ourselves along the child.
Growing.
Growing and letting go of unwanted habits and patterns, and going inwards and understanding what are the values that I want to raise my child by, what is already working, what's not working, without being too self-judgmental and
Hard on yourself.
Yeah.
That's really interesting what you said about the values. Like, if you become a parent, before you become a parent, sometimes you haven't got that all in check, so you don't even know yourself. So then how do you educate parents to kind of understand what they need and what they want from their life, to then be able to project that and kind of raise their children with the same values and kind of wishes for them as parents?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So when I coach parents and when I work with parents, I never go below like 8 sessions. We always work on a minimum period of 2 months together. Okay. And once a week we meet, I go into their homes. Every week I would meet them for 1.5 hours. And the very, very first session, I would what I would focus on with them is a discovery session. So what we do during that session, imagine we focus on a lot of challenges, right? This is not working, and this is hard, and this we have to improve. And so we put that away for a while, and we focus on what's actually already working. What's already working in your parenting arena? And I create with them a mind map, which is called The Power of Our Family, where we zoom into every family member and understand where is the light of Haley, where is the light of the dad, where is the power and what's the character of the child, and how is that coming together as a power of your own family. And then we take it a step further and we define the parenting values. So I would ask you as a mom, Haley, what do you believe are the parenting values that you want to raise your child by? And they could be a little different from the ones of your husband, but they can complement each of them, or each other, basically. So we don't really take the time often to sit down and pause and create the space to think about what are the values that are important to me and how can I foster them along the way. And then we take it another step further and we focus on, hey, what's already working in the parenting arena? Is the bedtime routine already working? Maybe meal times. She's a good eater, or he's a good eater. The connection, parent-child connection, that is working beautifully. So we really focus on the positives. And that creates a very powerful start then to be open to working on what's not yet working, what's hard, what's struggling,
I love that. A lot of people would probably come to you and they will literally, you'll walk in the door and they say, he doesn't do this, she doesn't do this, this is bad, they speak to me like this.
And how long does my child need until he or she does that?
Listens to me. Yeah, no, I can imagine how many times you get that. And I loved how you said that you actually don't work that way. You actually look at the positives, because parenting's hard. It's not all roses. It can be hard, especially if your husband's at work or you're at work or you're both full-time parents, full-time working parents. It is challenging. It's not an easy role. And I say that to some of my friends who are actually not working right now. And I say, you probably have a harder job than me.
Yes.
I'm back at work,
yes.
And you're full-time at home although it's lovely and it's amazing, it is challenging. You have to keep them occupied all the time. You have to try and keep your values in check. You have to try and I think it's an 80-20. I don't know if you agree with me here, that 80% of the time you're going to live by what you believe. And there's going to be a 20% of the time that you might slip up. You're very tired, you're exhausted.
Absolutely.
And the baby or the child or the toddler is just at you that day, nibbling at your shins, and you're just like, oh, I can't do this today.
Yeah.
So with the kind of communication, how can you keep the open communication with a child? Like when someone says to you, my child's reclused because potentially...
My child is?
Kind of recluse back, so not kind of speaking to me. Obviously, that's going to have come from a disconnect from previous, where maybe the parent has, and this is probably where you come in and you analyse and assess where that kind of went wrong. How can you, firstly, for our listeners, how can you stop that from happening to get to the point where the child does disconnect and kind of goes, I'm not listening to you and I'm not going to respect you anymore? I know that's probably a very broad, and you could probably speak for an hour just on this subject, but how can people not get to that point?
Okay, of disconnection.
Disconnection and the child not listening.
Yeah, okay. So, yes, I think from the very start, yes, the baby grows and then the toddler starts talking. I think it's very important for us parents to understand that they're a person of their own. They're not our mini-me's. They're not copies of us.
Although they might look like you.
They might look like us, but they are really their own person.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know that. But what's really, really important is of gifting them the power of their own voice, allowing them to speak, allowing them to have an opinion, allowing them to discover what they like, what they don't like, and voice that. And from our part, what I think we can do to foster that connection, to really make sure we see them, we hear them, so they understand that they matter, they understand that they are special. And I think it's a lot about respecting each other's interests and expectations and needs, as I was explaining earlier. And I think when we can do that as a parent, that's really connecting. That's really connecting. When we respect the child in front of us, and we don't expect the child to meet our expectations, to meet our needs, to meet our interests, because we got to do that on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you help parents? So, I mean, we talk about respect. So, how do you help parents that come to you and say, my child doesn't respect me? At that point, when a toddler or a child is kind of, let's say, throwing a tantrum, as we call it, I don't know if you call it that,
Tantrum,
but we say tantrum.
Yeah.
How can then the parent come in with it's very hard not to kind of, for your brain wire to kind of go back. How can we come in with the empathy, with the, okay, I need to listen to you, you are a child, you are your own person, and let's give you the choice here? Because I have seen and heard a lot of parents where they kind of, especially in the morning when they're dressing, they lay out 4 different outfits and say, which one would you like to choose today? And kind of the child will say this one or this one. Is that kind of an example of allowing them a choice, or which snacks would you like, or what would you like to take to school today?
Okay, yeah, that can be an example. For example, not laying out maybe the 4 choices, but laying out the 2 choices, and depending on the time we have, doing that the night before or in the morning.
Sometimes it's a rush in the morning before school.
And becoming ready that you might not like the choice that your child will choose, you know, and telling yourself, hey, it's
individuality.
Am I going to be okay with the choice she makes if I give those 2 options?
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to the food, I think there we need a little bit more the offering of our guidance, because depending on the age, the child doesn't know the nutritional facts.
Ice cream, chocolate.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what we never have to forget, despite not being in control, we are the ones in charge.
Okay.
So what does that mean? We are in charge because we are responsible for this child. The child is not responsible of us. Okay. We are responsible for the child's safety, and we are responsible to guide that child into the world in their best way possible. Why are we in charge? Because we have the responsibility, again, we have the life experience that is longer than theirs, and we have the more knowledge, the more life knowledge. Yeah. And that makes us to be in charge. So I don't mean we have to become permissive. We have to stay in charge with our responsibility, but when it comes to choices and allowing our child to be authentic, yes, we may have to respect their needs and expectations and interests if we want to nurture their confidence and their self-knowledge.
Okay, amazing. So we touched on tantrums very briefly.
Yeah.
Or outbursts.
Or emotional overwhelms.
Overwhelm, stimulation. How do you kind of coach parents to deal with that?
Okay. Do you deal with it at the moment?
She's only 14 months.
Okay.
So we very rarely have too many. She's very stubborn. So she knows what she wants.
Strong-willed.
She takes after me, I think, with that one. But if she wants something, she will literally point and scream until she either gets it. How we're trying to deal with it right now is we ask her to calm down and that we're not giving in until you've calmed down. So we will eventually, so when she's stopped crying and throwing her paddy, we then give it to her. So then she knows, okay, I was throwing a tantrum for no reason, and then I actually got what I wanted because I had stopped.
Okay.
Correct. Right or wrong, that's how we're doing it.
Okay.
But how
so
would
first
you...
of all, we need to understand when kids are pushing for boundaries or when kids are being stubborn, which I don't agree with, they're strong-willed.
Yes.
It doesn't serve them very well now because they are pushing through with a communication for the lack of a poor communication for the lack of a better communication because they don't know any better. But they are strong-willed, and when a child pushes for boundaries, it's a developmental need that they need to have where they're experimenting with their independence. And if they don't push for boundaries, then something isn't right developmentally.
They don't know what they can get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
kind
it's
of
really important for a child to push for the boundaries.
Okay.
So
it's a good thing.
that can help us to be a little less triggered when we know that what they're doing is developmentally important.
Yeah.
Now is the question, how do we respond to that, right? So now, when I work with parents, I teach them an approach which is called the connected approach, okay? So what I first do is I explain to them I go into a little bit of neuroscience with them. And I explain to them the human brain, and I represent that with my hand, basically, where we have the downstairs brain with the brain stem and the limbic area here, and we have the upstairs brain with the prefrontal cortex here. Now, the downstairs brain is fully developed at birth, okay? And that's where the heart rate is monitored, the breathing, and the reactive emotions as well, fight or flight mode, okay? Now, fully developed at birth. Now we have the upstairs brain here with the prefrontal cortex, which is not developed until the age of 25.
Wow,
Yes.
25?
Yes.
So you're still learning up until 25 and developing it since...
So what is in the prefrontal cortex, what we are developing here are executive functioning skills such as emotional regulation, impulse control, planning, so many different executive functioning skills that are still developing. So at the age of 14 months or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, how much do you think is the emotional regulation developed?
Not very
right?
much if it goes to 25.
Extremely underdeveloped.
Yeah.
So when parents understand that, they realize that the child needs help with emotional regulation and impulse control. Impulse means like I have an impulse, I want something, and I go for it. You know, we have it developed because we have developed brains above 25. So we have an impulse, but we can control it, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when a child is emotionally overwhelmed? You can imagine that as well when we are emotionally overwhelmed, the lid flips. And we don't have, it doesn't literally flip, but we then don't have access to the prefrontal cortex. What we have the capacity to do though as adults, we can do this. We can reintegrate again. We can regulate again emotionally. But our kids cannot do that on our own. So if we want to be effective disciplinarians or skill builders for our children when they're having an emotional overwhelm, is to help them do this.
To calm them down.
Yes. So how do you think we can help them do this?
By helping calming them down.
Yes. What do you think we need to do to help them calm down? Go back from a reactive state to a receptive state where we can then reason with them and talk to them and they can listen. What do you think we need to do as an approach?
I feel like this is a trick question.
I mean, I don't know.
Honestly, I kind of go down to her level. I try and give her a hug. I look her in the eyes, so eye connection.
Beautiful.
If that's not working, then obviously I try and hug her, or I try and get some toys out that kind of distract her from whatever she was feeling from the original instance.
So what do all these beautiful things that you just described now, what are they? Connection, right? So what we often do when our children are here, we correct. We correct, and they stay here. They will not be able to go here, back here. So what we should refrain from when they are here is refrain from correction and connection. We connect before we correct, basically. Okay. So we connect with the child, as you beautifully said, we go below the eye level, preferably. You know why? Because when we go below the eye level, it downregulates their central nervous system and it calms them physically down. And then we try to connect by giving an external response of ours to match their internal landscape. So let's say she is upset about something and starts throwing things, okay? Maybe you already know what she's upset about. Maybe you don't.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard and you don't even know, yeah.
So the very first step we have 3 steps that we always do when we help our children calm down. Before we connect, we try to understand. Why is my child acting this way? Mm-hmm. And based on that, we approach our child with curiosity. What's the matter? What's going on? You look so upset. What's going on for you? Okay? And then, along with that alone, when someone approaches you with curiosity, instead of judging you or correcting you, that alone helps you calm down.
Yeah.
Your husband coming in while you're very angry and saying, "Stop being so angry. Why are you so angry? I had a hard day too." Or let him come in and say, "Hey, you look so angry. What's going on? Tell me about it." Yeah. You immediately calm down. So, because he cares and he tries to understand instead of already correct what he doesn't understand. Yeah. So the understanding is the very first step. And then the second step is the connection. Trying to empathize with the child, being compassionate about, telling ourselves the child is still learning, the child is having a hard time, is not giving me a hard, the child is having a hard time.
How often do you hear that? The child's giving me a hard time.
Exactly. They're having a hard time dealing with their emotions. They need our help, you know. How can we be a calm in their storm? You know, not a storm in their storm. Yeah. So really connecting with them. And then guiding them through the third step of correction, you know, depending on what they did. You can be very upset, you can be angry, but you cannot hit mommy, you know. So trying to understand first, connecting then that they are going from a reaction to a reception, and then redirecting or correcting. That sounds very long now, but these 3 steps can happen in a minute.
Yeah. And I have seen it happen firsthand. I've got some friends who have got older children and I'm in awe. I will literally be like, how did you just do that? You just turned a situation where they were having a tantrum and you've literally just managed to, they're now happy and they gave you a hug, they apologized and now they've gone. Like they've gone off to play again. I'm like, how did you just do that? Yeah. I even say to my husband, we need to work on this.
So I remember very well when my son was 2 or 3 years old, in the very classical tantrum age of emotional overwhelm.
Terrible 2s, I think.
Terrible 2s, terrible 3s, they last a little longer. He has a temperament where he feels his emotions very, very strongly. So whenever he would be upset or frustrated or angry, he would throw things around. He would maybe come and hit me, or just for communicating, for the lack of a better communication. And I would then have these 3 steps in my toolbox and would approach him, first of all, with understanding and curiosity, right? And then I would ask, hey, what's going on? You seem so upset and frustrated. What happened? You know, sometimes I'm not in the same room. Sometimes I heard something and came into the room, and he would go, So he would not be able to even talk.
Okay.
So I would have these cards, they're called feeling cards, where each card has a face on them with a certain emotional expression. And I would take out those cards and I would lay them out and say, hey, when you see, when I'm gonna flick the cards, start flicking the cards now. When you start seeing your face, point at them with your finger. And that would help us tremendously, because I would flick and he wouldn't be pressured to talk. And then all of a sudden you would say, he would say, that one. Okay, is that how you feel? You know, and that card would be a very powerful conversation starter for us.
It's almost turned into a game now as well
It
for
turned
him.
into a game, it turned into a conversation starter, which was very gentle, but which helped me to tackle that first step of understanding, why is my child acting this way? What's going on, you know?
It's really hard, isn't it? Like,
It's
to
really
understand.
hard.
And you
It's
think
really
it's you
hard.
as well, you blame yourself.
Yes, and sometimes, you know, our tolerance window is not the same every day, as you said. Sometimes our patience is very scarce on certain days because we haven't slept enough, we had many things on our plate, where we wouldn't be having the time and luxury to stay and wait for the child, for the tantrum to get over, where I would tell, hey, I have to go back to cooking, but whenever you're ready for a hug, Mama is in the kitchen. Instead of just walking away and saying nothing and leaving the child there, we can say, hey, I can see you're very upset. Do you want a hug? You know, and he says, So I wouldn't have the time to wait. And I would say, hey, whenever you're ready for the hug, I'm gonna be in the kitchen, you know. So.
And then you've allowed him to regulate his emotions in his time.
And that's part of regulation, exactly. Thank you for saying that. It's part of regulation for the child and allowing the child to move through those waves of emotions and allowing them to get out of it and realizing, hey, it actually passes.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful realizations they need to learn, of not coming in and fixing the situation for them, you know, allowing them and not be scared of their emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a real fear for parents, is how are they going to behave today, or we're going out for dinner and I hope they're in a good mood.
Here we go, here again, another...
In the car.
Yes.
In the car is the worst.
Yeah. The car is the worst when they're 2, when they're starting fighting.
Not there yet.
Yeah. Enjoy. That's it.
What boundaries, do you think there's any boundaries that parents need to lay on
Absolutely.
kids? Yeah?
Absolutely. Boundaries are really, really important to help children navigate what they can and what they cannot do. What is right, what is wrong, they don't know. So it's really important as we navigate with them through life that we communicate in a gentle, in a polite way, in a humane way, what they can and what they cannot do. And that we have to be consistent with our boundaries. So when it is a certain food that we don't want them to eat, if we say yes today and no tomorrow and yes again the day after, it is extremely confusing. So it's very important that we are consistent in our boundaries. Yeah.
And you mentioned how you communicate it, so gently.
Gently and polite, but it can be firm, you know? And that's how we actually gain natural respect from our children. When we are able to communicate our boundaries or certain rules in a respectful way, in a consistent manner, and follow through with it, doing what we say. That's what is respect that we are then earning based on our communication, effective communication.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's my last question. I could talk for hours with you, but what would you say to parents that kind of have two different styles? So we're talking about kind of boundaries, communication. Say one is very extremely quite harsh on their boundaries and their limits set, and the other one's kind of a little bit more allows the child to kind of freely do. You've now got a separation in the parenting. How do you manage that when you're kind of coaching with parents?
Okay, very good question. So that's actually one session on its own where I sit down with parents and we really go down to understanding the parent-child dynamic and the parent-child relationship. And what I explain in that session is that a relationship is between two people. It's not between me, my husband, or the dad of our children and the child, or us as a whole family. That's not the parent-child dynamic. The parent-child dynamic is between me and this child. And if I have more children, it's between me and the other child separately. That doesn't mean that between me and this child, the boundary needs to be different towards the other child, or the rules need to be different. But what is really unique between me and this child is my expectations and my interests and my needs, and the very different ones of this child. And then separately again, the very different ones of this different child. Now, when it comes to being parenting partners between you and your partner, how you parent, if he has a different style, he has the right to have a different style. Again, it doesn't mean we don't have to align on certain ways of how we want to feed our children, what type of food we believe in they should eat, the type of education they should get, the type of rules there should be at home when it comes to screen time routine or bedtime routines or morning routines. Yes, we should definitely align on that. But when it comes to his expectations and needs and interests, we have to allow him to have his authentic space in his relationship with his child. And it is his relationship and not ours. We have our own relationship with that child. And I think that's extremely, extremely important, because when we give each other the space, we are allowed to be authentic. And we don't feel suffocated, and we don't need to jump into each other's spaces of, hey, no, you need to talk like this, and this is not how you talk. No, that's his space, you know. Yes, you can always give him your opinion later on, preferably not in front of the children. You can always give him your opinion, but it is his relationship and his imprint that he brings into the relationship with his children or his child.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because, for instance, my husband and I, we are fairly different. We have the same values, and we, like you said about food, we align on things like that, bedtime routine and those kind of things. But we're very different, so we are different people. So I've always been a bit concerned that because he's a bit softer than me and I'm a bit harsher, I'm going to be like the strict parent and he's going to be the fun one, which is what has always concerned me. But what you've said is correct, is allowing him to be who he is. Otherwise, he's just going to try and be me.
Yes.
And he can't do that because only I am me.
Yes.
Really.
And I talk from experience. I did this mistake in the beginning. I would jump into my husband's space and correct him, sometimes even in front of the children. So when I work with parents nowadays, it is really coming from my own lessons that I had to learn, because he retracted. Yeah. He retracted and he became less involved in interacting with the children because he didn't know how to be involved anymore. He didn't feel authentic anymore. He didn't feel he has the right to communicate in the way he would communicate scared. It is not my right. It is not my right, even though I disagree with how he communicates, to step into his space, you know? And you said parenting style. I mean, there are 4 different parenting styles, right? We have the permissive one, we have the negligent one, we have the authoritative one, and we have the authoritarian one, right? The ideal one is the authoritative one, where when we look at the demandingness and the supportiveness, we are equally demanding as we are supportive towards our children. Right? That's the authoritative one. That's the ideal mix between demand and supportiveness towards our children. Sometimes we are becoming a little bit too authoritarian, where we are becoming a little bit too demanding and not enough supportive, where we feel like, okay, we're becoming too strict, you know? But when we understand that a parenting style is never fixed, that we are sometimes jumping from one to the other, and that's actually natural, then we remove a pressure that we have to have only one parenting style. But when we understand that that ideal parenting quadrant of being equally supportive and demanding is the right one, and that our intention is to always go back there, instead of telling ourselves when we slip up and we're becoming too permissive, oh, I did it again, I became too permissive, or I became too strict, I will never be able to be equally demanding and supportive, then we are discouraging ourselves to go back to the authoritative one. So we are deleting that mindset, and we are adapting a mindset where we say, no matter how many times we slip up, our vision is always to go back to that authoritative quadrant, which is, in essence, connected parenting. Yeah. Sorry for that long explanation.
No, that's been amazing. And this whole session has been amazing. I know personally I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience and our listeners have as well. But we are sadly out of time. But again, we will obviously make sure that listeners can follow you and obviously connect with you if they've got anything. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you.
Hayley.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in our next episode, we'll be discussing a topic that is crucial for both adults and children: sleep hygiene and how you can improve your sleep quality. Stay tuned. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Angami. Stay well and keep thriving. Thank you.